gospel for today has in it for us more to contemplate. Those of you who haven't been here for the whole time, what we're doing is we're marching through the Hail Holy Queen together. And we're trying to find our way into deeper meanings, fuller meanings, richer meanings of that prayer, especially as that prayer talks about our lives and how that prayer always leads us back to Jesus, because that's the message of the medal, is that there are graces there that will lead us back to Jesus, and that's why we celebrate, why we honor Mary in this way. St. John Paul II, it's 36 years ago, wrote an incredibly dense but beautiful teaching on mercy called Rich in Mercy. And I'll bet most of us never read it. And even if we did, trying to understand John Paul II without help is a trick. It's like trying to understand Pope Benedict's writings. You really have to get in there and dig around to understand what's going on. But he talked about the present day, the time in which he was living, in which we're all living, and in which we're still living. The present day mentality, he says, more perhaps than that of people in the past, seems opposed to a God of mercy, and in fact tends to exclude from life and to remove from the human heart the very idea of mercy. The word and the concept of mercy seems to cause an uneasiness in man, who, thanks to the enormous development of science and technology, never before known in history, has become the master of the earth and has subdued and dominated it. He goes on, this dominion over the earth, sometimes understood in a one-sided and superficial way, seems to have no room for mercy. However, in this regard, we can profitably refer to the picture of the human situation of today that we find in the Constitution, the pastoral constitution on the church in the modern world. It's one of the church teaching from the Second Vatican Council. And he quotes that document saying, in the light of the foregoing factors, there appears to be a dichotomy of a world that is at once powerful and weak, capable of doing what is noble and what is base, disposed to freedom and slavery, progress and decline, brotherhood and hatred. Humanity is growing conscious that the forces he has unleashed are in his own hands, and that it's up to him to control them or to be enslaved by them. The situation of the world today not only displays transformations that give us ground for a hope in a better future, but also reveals a multitude of threats, far surpassing threats known before. The church must, in this time, examine them in the truth received from God. The deepest truth received from God is what we heard at the end of the gospel today. That the mystery of the cross is that which must describe our lives. If anyone wishes to come after me, he or she must deny their very selves, take up the cross, and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. To take up the cross, to embrace the mystery of the cross, we learned from Paul what that means. It's to participate in a particular ministry in the world. It's to reconcile the world. It's to participate in God's ministry, God's work of putting the world back together. And so we're called to do that in the face of what John Paul described, a world that's broken apart, a world that one day lives in one direction and the other day lives in another direction. And that brokenness is in the world and its structures, in families, in hearts. We live in a divided world, and we know that all too well this week. We live in a world that can produce an Orlando. And we're called to participate in God's work of reconciliation, which is our participation in the cross. We talked yesterday about God making a new creation. And so today the question is, for what? Why is God doing that? You know, if anyone is in Christ, he or she is a new creation. Why? For what? No. Go back 2 days. Because we get saved together, Benedict said. Salvation is a social reality. So being a new creation isn't just so I'm different. It's for something else. Paul goes on, the old has passed away. Behold, the new has come. All this is from God, who through Christ reconciled us to himself and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. That is, in Christ, God was reconciling the world to himself, not counting their trespasses against them, and entrusting to us the message of reconciliation. Therefore, we are ambassadors for Christ, God making his appeal through us. We implore you then, on behalf of Christ, be ye reconciled to God. For our sake, he made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the very righteousness of God. Why did he make us a new creation? Because he wants us to do this ministry now. He gave us the ministry of reconciliation. That's what the church is for, and that's what we are for. To confront a broken world and struggle to make it whole. And it starts by us being reconciled to God. And I don't just mean going to the sacrament of reconciliation. I mean, it means for us to accept who God says we are, you know, to be united with God. And we talked about how that happens. We deepen our relationship with God in Jesus Christ in prayer. We allow our suffering to connect us to the sufferings of others. We look at the world the way God looks at it, and we find our place amidst this people. That's being reconciled to God. We accept who we are in God's eyes. What does that ask of us in a world that's so provocative, that pushes so hard, as John Paul says, that almost seems like it has no room for mercy? It asks us to live, I think, with certain characteristics. And so we go back to the prayer. Hail, Holy Queen, Mother of Jesus, who is the source of all mercy, he who is our life, our sweetness, and our hope. To thee do we cry, we who were once poor banished children of Eve. To thee do we send up our sighs, mourning and weeping in this valley of tears that awaits watering and new life. O clement, O loving, O sweet Virgin Mary. We're being provided in the image of Mary with characteristics that make this this work possible. Clemency, the ability to not just forgive and pardon offenses, but to wipe them from our mind. We're being people will say, you hear this phrase all the time, it's very popular. I can forgive him, but I'm never going to forget. Right? We may have even said it. I have. But what we're called to be is clemency, is to clean it completely, to let those things go completely. It's very hard. But Paul says, I beg you, be reconciled to God. Let this happen in your life. Sweetness, we talked about what that was, a characteristic that allows people to come close, to be drawn to us. There's something welcoming about our character. And I know everyone's really busy and we get really defensive about our time. We try to maintain an intactness, and that's a healthy thing, don't get me wrong. But we need to ask God to give us the space to allow people in, or we can never communicate the word to them. And loving is what it is. It's that characteristic that puts the other before myself. Moms know, dads know, And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you blow the wind out of your lungs going, I don't know if I can keep doing this, but I'm going to keep doing it. God is making his appeal through us. St. Vincent told us, in other words, these characteristics, gentleness, meekness, approachability. But to be ambassadors for Christ really means that we're missionaries in the world entrusted with a message. The mission is still God's, but we're in the world as ambassadors, representatives. John Paul II continued, this is great stuff. Believing in the crucified Son means seeing the Father. Means believing that love is present in the world and that this love is more powerful than any kind of evil in which individuals, humanity, or the world are involved. Believing in this love means believing in mercy. For mercy is an indispensable dimension of love. It is, as it were, love's second name, the specific manner which love is revealed and effective. And that's the deeper call, is to be ambassadors for Christ in this way, to proclaim God's mercy, to live God's mercy, to live in the world in a way that says, there's another world possible here, and it's just beneath the surface. And people will catch that one by one, relationship by relationship. To take up your cross isn't really what we think of it as. It's not to carry my burdens. No. It always goes, take up your cross and follow me. It's not I'm bearing my cross. We've kind of let it run away into something that it never was. To bear the cross is to bear it aloft, as the ambassador bears the banner of his country in a foreign land. That's what we're called to do, to present the cross, to live the cross, so that people will know what mercy looks like and might believe that it can find a home here. We ask for the grace to begin by being clement and sweet and loving, to be a presence in the world that people see and say, perhaps God is merciful too.